Good evening, I'm Katie Cook. The Harlan County Health Department has confirmed 2 additional cases of COVID-19 this afternoon. The patients are a 68-year-old man and a 68-year-old woman who live together. They both were tested in Harlan County, and that brings the total number of cases in the county to 7. Officials in Harlan County do expect more positive cases in the area because of increased testing. Now, for more information on COVID-19 in Eastern Kentucky, you can head over to our website, WYMT.com. Well, it was another day of mostly peaceful protests in cities and towns across the nation as demonstrators call for change in the wake of George Floyd's death. Tom Hansen has the story from New York, where the curfew has now been lifted.
Demonstrators in Buffalo paused for a moment of silence as they gathered to protest the death of George Floyd in the custody of the Minneapolis police. There were also large crowds in Savannah, Georgia, Denver, and Chicago, all calling for racial justice and police reforms. Hands up! In New York City, after several days of mostly peaceful protests, the mayor ended the 8 p.m. curfew.
And honestly, I hope it's the last time we will ever need a curfew in New York City.
Here in Times Square, demonstrators gathered Sunday calling for ways to hold the police more accountable for their actions.
We have had enough! We have had enough!
In Washington, D.C., President Trump tweeted he's pulling back the National Guard, but he promised to bring them back quickly if needed. Earlier on Sunday, Representative John Lewis visited a street mural near Lafayette Park. The civil rights leader says he's been moved by the protests he's seen.
A sent a mighty, powerful, and strong message.
Derek Chauvin, the former Minneapolis police officer who held Floyd on the ground with his knee, makes his first court appearance Monday. He's charged with second-degree murder. In Houston, where Floyd grew up, a public viewing is scheduled for tomorrow, with a private burial on Tuesday. Tom Hansen, CBS News, New York.
And while some people in central Kentucky are taking to the streets marching against racial injustice, others are taking a different approach. We've seen a number of vigils to remember lives lost to police brutality. We saw the 8 minutes and 46 seconds of silence yesterday in Richmond, and this morning it was repeated in downtown Lexington. Now that is how long George Floyd was held under an officer's knee before he died. Participants were encouraged by the collective effort to bring justice and reform to their communities.
What you'll see is people coming together, and I really do think that that is our best strength. Our strength is our diversity.
A group in Richmond also held a similar vigil yesterday where, like today, folks quietly whispered the names of those lost. A GoFundMe page to support Breonna Taylor's family continues to grow. The fund was just created by Taylor's aunt, and at last check, the total was more than $5 million. More than 180,000 people have made a donation, and the page says donations will go to Taylor's mother and sister, who are both missing out on work and sleep since Breonna's death. Well, protests across the nation continue to spread a message against police brutality and an end to systemic racism in our country, all in the midst of a pandemic. Jim Stratman spoke with doctors and protesters about how the coronavirus is playing a role in the protest and how the protest could further spread the virus.
For 9 days, calls for justice and change have filled our nation as large groups of protesters line the streets chanting names, all in the middle of a pandemic.
You know, what we're getting from COVID is we tend to see little clusters. We tend to see little hot spots.
Dr. Ryan Stanton tells me that he doesn't see a true correlation between the protests and COVID-19 hotspots.
I saw a lot of articles coming out like 2 or 3 days after the protest and saying that, look, the numbers are going up from the protesting. And it's not the case. We're not going to see a huge jump in 2 to 3 days or even a week. Where we've seen areas that have significantly increased have been areas that either, one, are very popular for a lot of people to flock to, or areas that opened up very early.
That's good news for protesters like Joshua Masalia, who told me that the threat of catching the virus didn't keep him away from a vigil Sunday morning for the lives lost to police brutality.
COVID-19 is going to be here for a little bit. Hopefully we'll get a vaccine and then, our scientists deal with it. But the people need to deal with this. We need to come out and force. We need to come out and force and vote. put in people that we believe in who can create an actual change.
There's an interesting dynamic on display down here at the vigil. As one protester told me, they're trying to balance fighting two pandemics.
I think it's good to frame it in the sense that this is a pandemic. The deaths of black men and women in the streets is something that's been going on for a long time. COVID-19 is definitely a scary thing. I don't want to catch it. I don't think anyone wants to catch it. But when it comes to issues of social justice, that takes precedent, I feel like.
Dr. Stanton tells me that he expects to see case numbers rise in the coming weeks from reopening, but says new targeted approaches to clusters should take precedent over more blanket closings and restrictions. Reporting in Lexington, Jim Stratman, WKYT.
Well, if you haven't got a chance to get outside and enjoy the weather, definitely make sure you do that before the sun goes down, because we've just been seeing gorgeous and very comfortable conditions all day today. Let me take you to some of our current conditions so you can see these. If you look out at our WYMT studio camera here in Hazard, Kentucky, I mean, just blue skies all the way, not a cloud really in sight. I mean, absolutely gorgeous outside, and we do have a little bit of a breeze today. Very calm, but it is coming out of the northeast. It's really bringing in that cooler air, and it kind of allowed some of us to not get quite as warm as we were yesterday. You can see those temperatures more towards that northeast corner only really got to those lower 80s today. Some people only got into the 70s. You can see 79 over into Logan, West Virginia, and into Pikeville, but everywhere like such as Moorhead, Ashland, Jackson, Prestonsburg, lower 80s. Now, if you look more towards the south, towards that Kentucky-Tennessee border, they did get to those mid to upper 80s once again, but definitely a little bit cooler than what we saw yesterday. And we're only going to continue to cool down now that we are heading into those evening hours. We'll stay in those 80s probably the next couple of hours, but once we lose that sunlight, we are just going to drop drastically thanks to those nice clear conditions from those 80s back to those 70s and into those 60s. And by the time we get to those early morning hours tomorrow, we may even drop into those upper 50s for overnight lows. So it'll be a little bit cooler tonight, a little bit more comfortable, but we are only going to warm up as we head into tomorrow. So expect another very, very hot day ahead, and actually a couple hot days ahead here. Katie? All right, thank you, Brooke. Hillview Stables in Laurel County opened yesterday for some spring fun, offering a way for people to get out of the house after being healthy at home for the past few months. WYMT's Dakota Makris checked it out and has more.
Those are some of the sights and sounds you will hear at Hillview Stables.
I had a lot of people call and wanted to know if we was open any during the year besides the pumpkin patch in the fall, and I said no, normally not.
Offering families a way to have fun.
I just like to see people come and have a good time and see the kids smiling faces, and they've not had anywhere to go, no playground, no activities hardly at all for them to do for the past 3 or 4 months.
Here they offer pony rides, train rides, petting zoos, but my favorite here is the camel ride.
The camel rides. Yeah, you can't ride a camel everywhere.
And the list of fun continues.
We have a kangaroo jumping pillow that everybody enjoys. We have a large shell corn pit. It's like a sand pit, except it has shell corn in it for kids to play in.
From kangaroos to horses, all can be seen with social distancing in mind.
Kind of limited number coming in at the door, and we've got tape on the floor at the concession stand, and you know, telling everybody, and we've got signs out and just telling everybody to be safe.
Hoping the sound of jumping and trains will soon be heard throughout the mountains. In Laurel County, Dakota Makris, WYMT Mountain News.
Now, Hillview Stables closes tonight at 8, but will reopen next weekend at 11 in the morning. As it heats up outside, many people head to the pool. During the COVID-19 outbreak, public pools have not been able to open, but that has not slowed down business at Low Pools in Corbin. They have seen increased business as people come in wanting to put a pool in their own backyard. Stephen Lowe, the operations manager, says it has led to a decrease in inventory.
Many people are staying at home this year. They're not taking their family vacations, so they have put all that money into their outdoor space in their backyards. So many people have wanted to put above grounds and grounds in.
We will have more on how pool companies operate during the coronavirus pandemic coming up at 11. This year's Tri-Festa has been canceled, but that hasn't stopped work on the Highland Festival grounds at the Kentucky Expo Center. More than $1 million worth of improvements are being made to the festival area. The area is expanding by 8 acres and permanent driving lanes are being put into parking lot C. That work is expected to wrap up in July. Tri-Festa, which includes Hometown Rising, Louder Than Life, and Bourbon and Beyond, had been scheduled for September, and it was canceled this year because of COVID-19. Well, for the past 40 years, there is one bass tournament in Knott County that fishermen always look forward to. WYMT's Camille Gear has more on this year's Vico Sassafras Fire and Rescue Bass Tournament.
This sound is one often heard at the 40th annual Vico Sassafras Fire and Rescue Bass Tournament. This year's tournament was up in the air due to COVID-19.
We actually only got the word that we was going to be able to have it probably 2 weeks or so before tonight. And it's one of our biggest fundraisers. It was definitely going to be a huge impact on our department.
When they finally learned they could have this year's tournament, there was plenty of excitement.
It was definitely very exciting for everybody. I mean, it's something that's tradition here with Vico Sassafras. We've done this for 40 years now, and we're glad to be able to continue it.
With 33 boats participating, this year's competition was tough.
I had a possibility. I mean, I knew where some fish were at and had a good idea of what we needed to do.
And for winner Jeffrey Coots, the $2,000 award money was a catch.
Well, we was kind of shocked actually, but last fish we caught this morning kind of broke the ice. It put us over the edge, thought we had a good shot at winning it.
In Knott County, Camille Gear, WYMT Mountain News.
There was also award money given for second place, third place, and the biggest bass. Coming up on Mountain News Weekend Edition, with quarantine coming to a close, find out what business is seeing major profits as a result.
And it was nice to have a dry couple of days, but the question on everybody's mind, when do those rain chances return? Well, I'll have that answer coming up.